Swan has no public comments. So we'll go right to the review of the city manager annual performance criteria.
Oh, should we approve the agenda?
Oh, yeah.
That's committee meetings?
Well, yeah, might as well. It's not on the agenda, but we should put it.
Motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's done. Good. Forgot to put that in. So, all right, now. Okay, now review.
So here is some items I've put together that in an effort to try to somewhat make it doable or reviewable and objective. I split it down into quarters, so basically for 2%, 0.5% for each of these. You can do whatever you'd like. These are just some of the areas that I think are objective, that we have a clean audit, the preparation of the operating budget, and adoption. Under financial management, those are two objective items. Communication and public engagement. There are a couple of things that council members have mentioned to me that I've added in here. So if you guys see something when we talk about it, one is just satisfactory public communication practices. I know one of the things we've worked hard at is trying to make sure we can reach out to the public in many venues, whether it's the newsletters that go on the PPU bills. We got the new app. We do monthly radio interviews. We work with the local media, including the Collegian folks, which we typically get maybe 2 to 4 a week. As they work on their stories.
Last time they started calling me less. Because I was saying yes to every time, and I stopped saying I can, they stopped calling me less, so.
Yeah, well, you can do.
Yeah, I know, right, I know.
We can't necessarily. And just to get accurate information out there, like, really recently did one on the air for hangers, or working on one.
You need to do it.
Yeah, and we gotta get it out there from the standpoint of the city. And the second thing, which is kind of new, or is new, is something that Coldwater does and other communities do in the state. They created what they call a Citizens Academy. And in Coldwater, they have like a 7-week program, and they limit it to a certain number of folks. And then each week is a different area of the city. So in our case, like 1 week could be water and sewer, and we could take them to the water plant and the sewer plant, so they understand how the city operates.
So you sign up as a public if you want to come see that.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'd accept a certain number of folks for an academy, and then over 7 or 8 weeks, we would do 2 hours a week and do different areas of the city.
Do they give out any kind of certificate?
They do.
Okay.
They do, that you've completed it,
Yeah.
and they make a presentation with the mayor and a council that they completed the academy, and,
Yeah.
one, it does a couple of things. Gives folks an opportunity to learn, but it also gets information out in the community that may be more accurate than they get from asking my buddy or whatnot, or friend.
That's really good.
And the idea would be to put a program together that council could endorse, and then we could implement, say, over next winter or.
So it wouldn't necessarily call your time, it could be Jake.
Right. We would coordinate it from all the groups, basically, say Jeff from Water and Sewer, Jake from Electrical, the police chief, myself, Jason on roads, Kim on assessing and code enforcement, airport, we have Ginger. So, you can have all these things, and whether you have, 15 folks or whatever. It's an idea. We could put together the actual plan is what I have here, is the creation of it, and we could implement it next winter. It's just something for you guys to think about or discuss. The next item, community development. Now, there's a number of things in an effort not to make it too burdensome. I picked some of the bigger ones that I think are on kind of on our list. A long-term plan for the Mitchell building. I know community development is working on that. And the idea would be to get that hashed out here before November. Yeah, well, true. And then conduct review of incentive/abatement policies and update if needed. I know Josh has expressed an interest in this, maybe getting done. So we could put this on a goal list, and Kim and I could go through all of them and then present it to the appropriate committee to look at updating them. And then lastly, infrastructure and operations. We have the capital improvement plan, which includes roads, water, well, it includes all major expenditures within the city. And we presented that to the Community Development Committee the other day to talk about it because they were interested in that from a standpoint of different areas that they're involved in. But that is a few-month process. It goes to the Planning Commission, it goes then to City Council for approval, and it puts all the things that we need to keep in our horizon in one document. Whether we do them or not, it's typically a 5-year plan. Like, for example, we know we've got culverts in the city that have been there for 100 years, like the one on Hillsdale Street. It's failing, but they're so expensive to replace, we've just been trying to get grants for them. But if one collapses, that's $1 million ticket. So those are the things that we want to include that might not have been included in the past, just so that the whole picture's out there of what we got.
Well, we have to list as well, right?
Yes. Like there's one culvert in front of the sewer treatment plant. If that one goes out, they can't get access to the sewer treatment plant. That could be a problem. This one just for access and whatnot. So, but that's just one item that will be included in that. Like I said, it's about a 3-month process that we work through planning, zoning, and all the departments contribute. It's some could be somewhat tied to financial management, but this is over a 5-year period where the budget's a singular year. And what happens is we work towards achieving the first year if we can, and then it's a rolling. So then we add to the end or move back. That is something there. And then preparing a 3-year schedule of upcoming road and infrastructure projects and funding sources. Now, this has been something we've talked about for a while, is actually forecasting what roads we're going to do next year, the second year, or third year, if everything worked out. We haven't had a chance to do it because we've actually been doing a lot of projects, but we could make that a focal point and get that 3 years kind of a rolling deal. And that would include working with the city engineer and DPS and the appropriate committees to actually prioritize the plans and why. Like, every 3 years we get a grant from the state for major roads. So we know what major road should go next. So we plug that in plus additional things. So these are 8 items. There could be additional ones, but quite simply, we can make it as difficult as we want, or add as many things as we want.
The way I see it, it's not like community development and infrastructure. The first step is, this is the goal, this is the plan, and then I guess we kick that around, and then we can put hard numbers to it for your performance evaluations. Sure. Like we talked about somebody percentage road, but you can't do that unless you know the funding, and you can't do that unless you have the plan together. This is the plan, so that'd be part of your first performance evaluation, we have a solid plan for X number of years,
Yeah.
you know, based on, then once we know we have funding in it, then your next step is to execute the plan.
Right. Right, like the community, the
Yeah.
Citizens Academy, we could put that together, that every council checks off on.
Yeah,
I think it would be a benefit, you know, we're doing almost everything we can otherwise.
yeah.
Um,
You know, whether it's successful or not, it's not really, I mean, you got a plan, you got an opportunity, but if the public doesn't grasp it, doesn't wanna do it, that's, you know, that's not a performance issue, your part is to develop a plan and execute it, nobody shows up, well, I'm not expecting about to drag people in here, about like, back in the head, and just, you know, I got it in here, I'm not gonna.
yeah, no, but, you know,
Yeah,
you know, we could add different things, but I would just encourage that it needs to be somewhat objective, so that, you know, I could be judged or based off of it, so these were the things I had came up with, we could add or change. That would be up to you. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just on the objective front, satisfactory, I mean, you know, what exactly does that mean?
Wow, I agree.
As long as I'm not getting emails that the city manager is never available to comment on anything, that seems, you know what I mean? That one just seems possibly a little vague.
I could just say, maintenance of, 'cause these are all existing things, right?
That we've built up.
Yeah, so just maintenance of these things, that would be objective.
Right, except for possibly the working with local, you know, as long as I guess we don't hear a complaint that the city is
Yeah,
unavailable.
yeah.
But the newsletter and the app are pretty objective.
They're
Is it getting
objective.
the information out?
Well, you could actually, even on that local media thing, you could keep track of the number of times you talk to these people.
Sure.
Even there, I wouldn't necessarily want to set a goal or, you know.
No, not a quote, I'm not
Okay.
saying that.
We're
I'm
not
just
looking
saying,
for time
you know,
slots.
and then we could decide, obviously, you know, is this guy slacking off or, you know, whatever, but obviously.
You're probably getting contacted every 2 weeks or something, every council meeting?
Every council meeting, well, actually, we're probably contacted every week, once or twice.
Okay.
You know, from the SADs, the airport right now. Actually, right now, also getting questions about the water, the fluoride in the water. And, you know, some of them we have less comments for than others, like in that one, until you and council delineate your goal.
Yeah.
We don't really have a comment except for, you know, that's the process, you know, so once that's determined, then we,
I guess, is there a process or protocol, what comes out of your office versus what somebody in your staff would answer? Like Chief Hacker or Jake or somebody would answer a question?
yes, typically they all come through my office.
Okay,
And if, I feel it's more appropriate for them to answer
okay,
directly,
but you know what you're gonna say?
yes,
That's it.
I know what they're going to say.
Yeah, okay, but, okay, so you have different people talking, but you're controlling the communication.
Correct, and Sam is also,
Yeah.
because of his background,
Okay.
he does all the communication on the radio, because, you know, that's his
Good thing.
specialty, right? So, that's how we handle that.
I guess I would like to add something to this, certainly in the realm of public safety, you know, whether it be the fire department, police department, something that's.
Yeah, so I looked over the opioid committee funds. My big suggestion was going to be that the city prepare a proposal for the county commissioners. We can model it after, what's the county for Grand Rapids, Kent, I believe, that one. And they used it for drug enforcement, you know, Wayne and Eaton and Lansing, or whatever that is up there, Washtenaw, are using it for safe depository boxes and that sort of things, but it does look like we can apply for it for drug enforcement in particular. And Doug just said the money's sort of out there.
Yeah.
As the grants roll in, they're pretty likely to approve them, so if we don't get on that, they might be used for things that are, at least in my opinion, less effective for actually solving the problem. So, I don't know if that would be a goal or.
Yeah, well, proposal, would be we object to planning.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
definitely
we
can
can
ask.
ask you to
What they're gonna
require
do with
it,
it,
yeah.
right?
I guess we could say proposal for opioid settlement funds grant.
Now, what about the homeless thing? Right.
I just don't know what the goal.
Yeah, exactly, that's why I asked, what about the homeless?
It doesn't look like we can get any of this opioid money of it from my reading of it. Have you seen the document?
I have not
I
seen
can
it.
send it to you. It is so vague. It's unbelievable. It seems like these purposes or other similar purposes in every category. So yeah, again, I think that should be a private thing. Share the Warmth is getting together a funding proposal. I'm not really sure what action the council can take.
I don't know,
Or
maybe
the
it's
manager.
I don't think we should get into, public welfare stuff.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
We just don't have the dough.
It was just so we don't have homeless living in the streets and in public parks, I think that's more law enforcement than
Right.
homeless problem.
You know, we work with any of them that come forward with, you know, if they have a building or something they're looking at, you know, we work with them like we would any
Yeah,
other
right.
business, you know, to see if it's owned properly, if it's in good repair, and we do those things.
I would think just put a keep it on public viewpoint, I mean, so they're not on the trails, not playing in the parks, and not all standing community on the street corner.
Yeah, and we do have, you know, I think around April is when it's intended that the tents Missy's place is intended to come down.
Yeah.
And we're gonna work towards that
Yeah,
goal.
right. Or, yeah, I look at it, I'm talking about, I look at the city as more as a pressure point from enforcement. Or, you know, and then we have community people here to help the homeless people, but, you know, it's a pressure point.
So we don't have to put anything in here.
Yeah.
Maybe you could investigate whether it's possible for a private homeless shelter to receive some of those county funds. It doesn't sound like Penny would want them necessarily because of the strings attached, but it might be worth investigating, and you might have some knowledge within city staff of how exactly that would work, if it is possible. But yeah, I would like to see a specific grant for some sort of, drug task force. I don't know if there are any other ideas that the chief has.
Yeah, /city/county, we work with, you know, Hodgeshire at the same time.
Right, even if you write the grant and you say, you know what, the county's more
Yeah.
well suited to administer this, you work with them to get it done. I don't really care which agency it
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
The conduct review, I guess, maybe I wanna know, like, again, are there objectives here, or are we just reviewing it?
Well, I think it's been expressed that our policies and plans need to be updated, and the idea would be to go through that all by one, much like the charter.
Okay.
You know, look at the IFE, the CR, the commercial, and the residential, and try to get them all up to date.
Okay, yeah, I'd definitely like to work through that, especially the development agreements that are attached to these. And then identify a long-term plan, again, this is so contingent, you could identify one and council says no. The rest
Or they
is what
say
we
no.
do. If we're fine with that,
Or they say no.
or they say no.
Yeah.
You know, there has been, you know, we are exploring again, selling it to them, for basically $1 or thereabouts.
I heard about this at community development, sorry to interrupt, but my main concern is if they can't care for the building, this is gonna end up in city hands again and possibly a deteriorated state in the future.
Yes, this is exactly what my concern is.
Oh, okay.
And the committee's concern. So, in my question to the city attorneys, that was,
Okay.
yes. One, if we sell it to them, but two, you know, that we have only the option to take it back if something, you know, they can't maintain it. Because if they go for many years and don't maintain it, it could be in worse shape than it is today.
Another keeper house on our hands.
Yeah, and so we'd have to weigh that very carefully. You know, they've expressed interest in doing that in the past. And if we get over the legal hurdle and they say we can, then it's a question of will the full council, the committee will recommend that to the full council, and then if the Mitchell folks would be interested in doing that. They've mentioned it in the past, but
You got motion, you got the building, you got the crate jack in there, there's three
Yes.
things you got.
Is it worth, is it worth anything on the private market if they were convinced to take their activities somewhere else?
the structure is worth something on the private market. We've had, I've had an estimate done on it, and we have probably it's worth $700,000. It would need a couple $100,000 or more of work, but it's a 6,000 square feet historic structure.
You're not gonna build it.
No, you know, so it is worth something, but it's all, I guess, to have the service in the community is worth something, and that's a decision for council and whether they can do that or not. I know that was with Drew, who was the spokesperson when they came forward. You know, that was the intention to do it, try to raise money and build their sufficiency over 5 years, but, you know, if you know, it costs us $15,000 to $20,000 a year just to maintain it the way it is, the committee's thought was, well, why don't we give it to them or sell it to them now, and like motivate them to fundraise sooner.
Can they afford the operating costs even right now if they would have to pay them?
I believe they have that money, that money saved up, and I know that they, you know, they periodically receive donations from folks, so I believe they have the money.
Good.
They would just need to kick it in, you know, get organized and
There's the rub.
Yeah,
Get
well,
organized.
I heard part of the problem, people don't wanna donate because the city owns it.
yes, that has
They
been.
didn't, the city didn't know if they would go out, but that's, I don't know, sure now.
So that's actually the hope on this, and, you know, that will take some finesse getting that through the process. If we decide to go forward with it.
Okay, I really like the schedule of upcoming road infrastructure projects. I think that'd be very helpful, especially if we have a special assessment that's 3 years out, and you can send a letter and said, the council and the staff are considering this, you should start saving $100 a month so you can pay this off, or something like that.
Sure.
I think that's a great idea. I'm wondering if the preparation of the operating budget should include something substantive in it, like goals that we've outlined.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
most definitely.
Okay. Another, I don't know, seems like with the progress we've made in some of these budgets, we might be able to say another $150,000 from the general fund toward infrastructure. I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but as you get closer to a finalized budget, it might be helpful to know what is possible there. And then will the capital improvement plan include the possible acquisition or repair of the fire department and CPS building? Okay.
Yeah, that would also be part of it, included in that. The whole idea there is you've got a 5-year rolling plan, so, you know, people can at least know that there's these larger tasks out there that we have to at some point figure out how to solve.
Any further?
Looks good to me in outline. Yeah, I'd like to see some more of the specifics, but yeah, I think that's good in outline.
Well, I can do that for the next meeting, and then I have just a couple of other things I was gonna share with you guys. And Josh, you had handed these out, or this out, the last meeting, just some proposed benchmarks, and I want to make, I made some, comments, as well as some preliminary analysis the finance director did. And I think the number one is probably the most telling, because, you know, and we hear this from many folks, as well as on council, you know, how efficient are we with our dollars, right?
Yep.
And so if you look at the first one, this is the answer to this question for communities about our size. Coldwater's a little bigger than us, but Marshall's a little smaller. And this is how much in their general fund they're spending on their per capita expenditure. So you look at Marshall, they're almost twice as much as us. And this does tie to when you look at their assessed value for all their properties, you will see that Marshall's is twice as much because we have all our nonprofits. So because, you know, we have a lot of churches, we're a county seat, Marshall's not, and some of the others, all their buildings are pretty much on tax roll. Ours are not, or a large portion it's not. Probably the closest ones to us, community-wise, is Niles and Charlotte. Just because they're either county seats or they have a high, low to moderate income population. But as you can see, at $624 per resident, you know, we're half of Marshall. You know, we're still less than Charlotte. We're about the lowest.
How would you rate the quality of this service?
Our services,
Yeah, I mean.
it's difficult to rate the quality
Yeah.
because, so when I came
You
here,
know, look at
we have a
crime rate.
list.
Would it be crime rate, would it be road repair, would it be?
So what this does is basically wrap all those together, and we don't say whether we're doing good or bad. We're just saying we're providing these services for $624 a resident. Now, you know, we could look deeper into this and say, okay, like the one question was on public services. We could break that down into police and fire, or dial-a-ride. And the challenging thing is every community is somewhat a little bit different.
Yeah.
You know, dial-a-ride in Marshall and Coldwater are county-wide, and they have a millage. So we can't compare that.
So it's a county,
And so
that's the city.
Yeah, and so it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And some of them don't have electric utilities, that's a big one. Some of these do, but you just gotta make sure you're comparing apples to apples.
Yes.
Like Charlotte, they have a fire authority, they don't have a fire department within the general fund, so they have a county-wide organization. So you have to know that and be able to know what to subtract out. Karen, the finance director, has worked with a number of these, and so she was able to look at, like Marshall, she was the finance director there, and say, okay, this is what they are. She was in Charlotte, and they're somewhat comparable in size, but I would venture to guess that Hillsdale is probably one of the most frugal for the services we provide, because they get no better service in these communities. It just costs them more because of what they have.
We look at staff, administrative staff.
Yep.
Size-wise, yeah.
Yeah, and that's on this list too, administrative staff. And I just put some comments there, and Josh and I can talk about them later. But, you know, these are good points to look at.
Yeah.
And one of the other ones that we put together was, sheet for, this was on debt compared to other cities. Now, Hillsdale has very little, and this kind of came off the same premise. But Hillsdale has very little debt. All we have is the road, the general fund debt for the Westwood project. That's only debt that the general fund has, which is less than 1% of what you compare it against, which is outstanding.
Yeah.
But, you know, there is some philosophy that you should have more because you get more done. And then there's a philosophy that we've had in the past where we had none.
Right.
Westwood is probably the first bond, I can't even recall when there was a bond done on the general fund side. Now they've had them on the BPU side because, you know, the sewer treatment plant was $9 million.
Right.
So that side is out of rates. This is strictly out of general fund.
Yeah, it's lots of, yeah.
So this is just a comparison for you to look at.
What's your methodology for the per capita expenditures? Is that general fund divided by population? Does that include grants?
It does not include grants, so it would be straight up general fund monies, no grants involved, one-time expenditures.
Does it include the BPU pilot to the city, for example, stuff like
Yes,
that?
it would include that as revenue, yes. And like Marshall receives that from theirs, and Coldwater does, I believe Niles does. I don't think Charlotte has an electric utility, I'm almost positive they don't.
I wonder if you took cities, Albion, Olivet, cities where a college is a central part of its operations, if we might get closer. I'm wondering if we're even worth it. I knew it was very bad in comparison to other cities, just based on some minimal research, but it's pretty shocking.
Yeah, and I can get those numbers, for our next meeting.
What else would be small liberal arts towns? Adrian doesn't really qualify.
No, they're too big, they're 20-some thousand.
Alphabet, Albion, similar size, right? College,
Does
stuff like
Albion
that.
have a hospital?
I don't think so.
No, and they don't have schools anymore either.
Do they really not?
That's why,
So where's a place with a hospital, a college, a school, and the county seat?
that's the question.
And a fairgrounds?
That's the big question right there. And,
And a DPU?
yeah,
That is
so,
unfortunate.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But
That's-
I'll get those two and we can talk about them at the next one. I don't think, that is that big.
For city employees, would you count BPU there?
Well, not if you're comparing the numbers just for the general fund.
Although in a
Unless
sense-
they did water and sewer. If they did water and sewer, then you'd have to count those.
Because that comes from the city side?
Well, we would count, if we're looking at a number of employees, if most likely they are running their water and sewer treatment
But not
plants.
necessarily
So
electrical.
we could take those employees from the BPU and include them in the numbers.
I see, okay. Okay, this is good. This is the sort of thing that I would like to be able to publish and say to the residents, here's why things are the way they are. You know,
See-
there are ways, as we've seen at these meetings, where we can tinker with things and save 50,000 here, but the whole structure of it is
Structure.
not good.
So Olivet's only 1,605 people, their population, so that,
Oh, the city, really? And then they have a college that doubles that?
yeah,
Don't they have 1,000 people there?
yeah. So
Okay.
that wouldn't necessarily be a comparison.
Some places that have colleges also have those pilots, we don't.
Yes, I sent that to different half.
And we're probably not gonna get one either.
Probably not. This is something that, the folks up there have requested, and I thought that would be good to show them, you know, we're not blowing this cash, the roads aren't falling apart. Although there was mismanagement a decade ago, 20 years ago. That's not necessarily what's happening today. Thank you for that. I'm looking forward to more details.
Yeah, I'll be in 7,700, so that's fairly close to us, you know, we're at 8,300 plus the college, so they're 7,700s without the college, like our 8,000 to 8,300. So we'll pull those numbers, but they don't have the hospital, they don't have school.
Yeah, it's not gonna be. If one thing, I don't think I put this on here. One thing I would like to know in the same line of thought is, what is our ratio of taxable to non-taxable property? And are there any equivalent cities? And if there are, is there anything we can learn from them about how they manage their affairs under those same budgetary constraints?
Okay.
This is such a unique, I'm really
It is.
struggling to think of anything like it in Michigan.
But that's a good way of amalgamating the whole thing.
Yeah.
I get with Kim and we'll start seeing if we can find that data.
Thank you.
Taxable versus non-taxable, a similar ratio.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be, somewhat of a way to compare our situation.
Yeah, when I talked to her last year, she was under the impression it might be as high as 60-40 taxable to non-taxable. There's also another document I wanted to ask her to update the top taxpayers. I think she could probably pull that info pretty quickly. It's under the city's forms and documents. Like,
I've seen those lists before.
it was last done in 20, I believe, 2020, so if she could update that, I'd be curious.
College used to be number one, and then it dropped to number 7, and then went up to number 4, as I recall.
Yeah, I believe they were at $120,000 or $130,000 a year last we checked.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll have it for the next meeting.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's all I got. We'll work on some more detail on the items and then these items for the next meeting.
Great. Thank you. All right. Now, next thing is, the event we've all been waiting for, the charter. And the first thing we should review is this thing that David kindly provided us with. Did you all get this, the charter revision?
I didn't print it.
Here,
So do you wanna, some of these questions, Dave, do you wanna meet about how we should define administrators, stuff like that,
Yes.
public service?
we can do that.
All right. Now, a couple of things just that I learned from this, that we have to be careful with our language, because we're not doing a charter revision, we're doing a charter
Is
amendment.
there another one of those?
I can go make you a copy of mine.
That's okay, I looked at it online.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Because a charter revision would mean a major alteration of the charter, such as going from a combination of city manager, mayor,
Mhm.
thing that we have, to either pure city manager or pure mayor and council. That would be a revision. Whereas the amendment is something that is simply what we're thinking of doing, which is to just clean it up to make sure that it's all conforming to state laws. And which doesn't, it's not a regime change, in other words. So you'd think it would be the reverse almost, but it isn't. It's a revision is a major one.
Yeah.
So,
Amendment is not.
yeah, amendment is what so we're real, and we have, so when we talk about this in public, we always have to say amendment rather than revision. And the first one is gonna have to correct my language on that, I'm sure. See, it says here on page 13, at the top right-hand thing, a change in the form of government. What we're looking at is, Penny, is the, it's a thing that's provided by the state of Michigan on charter revision and amendment.
Okay.
And it's a very handy thing to have. If you might download it yourself at some point.
Yeah.
So take a look at it. But at the top of page 13 on the right-hand side, it says, a change in the form of government would require charter revision and not merely amendment. So that's one of the key things we have to look at. And then, so we can avoid, or ignore all this stuff about revision that's in here, just look at charter amendment. And amendment, may be proposed by 3/5 of the members of the legislative body or by an initiatory petition of electors. Well, we're doing the former, right? We're doing the proposal by the legislative body. This isn't a village charter amendment, so we don't have to worry about village charter amendments. We're just doing city charter amendments, right? And then eventually, if any amendments that we propose would have to go to the governor's office, and the AG would look at them first to make sure that they were okay, right, and accurate. And since we would be trying to make our charter in conformity with their own statutes, I imagine that they would be able to turn it around fairly quickly.
So amendment requires the governor's approval?
So, yeah, the governor is presented with the proposed amendment. This is on 15, top of the left-hand column. The governor is presented with the proposed amendment of a city or village charter for approval. If not approved, it is returned to the legislative body, that's us, with stated objections for reconsideration. And then it goes on, and then you have to publish it in full with existing charter provisions to be altered or abrogated. So you have 2 columns, I assume, with the original language and then the revised language. And then the purpose of the amendment would be designated on the ballot in not more than 100 words. So, keep it simple, as they say. And then proposed amendment is confined to one subject. The subject embraces more than one related proposition. Each of them must be separately stated to allow an elector to vote for or against each proposition. Now, this is the question that I have, which is, does this commit us to some sort of incredibly lengthy statement on the ballot, which would be prohibitive, in my opinion? And if that is the case, we should check that with Tom, right? Find out whether that's what it would entail, because we couldn't really do that. And so what I'm suggesting is that if we can't do that, what we can do is to take the thing that's on the website and have a commentary on it at the bottom. It wouldn't be part of the charter, so we wouldn't be changing the charter, but it would have that 2-column thing that says, here's the language that is obsolete, that is in this charter, and here's the statutory language that now prevails. And then have a little note at the top explaining this, and also have a little note, and maybe at the top of the charter itself saying, see below for the,
So it's a clarification.
what actually
It's not
exists.
an amendment, it's just
Yeah,
clarification.
because otherwise, we don't want it to just sit there, because it's so misleading to have it the way it is, and it's confusing.
It is.
And,
It has the editor's notes now, but even some of those are incorrect and they're often not fully explanatory.
yeah, so I think we can do something for sure. We can definitely do something, and I think that as far as going to the voters on it and actually changing the charter itself would depend on how practicable it is to put it on the ballot. If all we need to do is that explanatory thing, then that's fine. But if we have to enumerate everything on the ballot, I'm sure you've got a couple dozen of them there, and the people would balk at that.
For the revision, they post it on like a wall when you walk into the election area, and they post it in the city clerk's office or somewhere in public.
Okay,
So
well, what about an amendment?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I assume you would have to do the whole thing, but then I think you use the language on the ballot. But we should
We need to know that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I did make you guys a copy of the Home Rule City Act as it pertains to a charter amendment.
Yeah.
So here's actually the charter amendment procedure, so,
This presumably is a summary of that, right?
yes, the actual, section of the code.
And this says the same thing that this thing says.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
they summarize the summary, but this also provides like a, step
Oh.
by step,
Here's another thing,
step by
that I
step.
think we should do. We don't do this enough, is to get in touch with our very fine state elected representatives and say, look, when the legislature changes something in our charter, in effect, changes something in our charter, passes a law that is, that supersedes an element of our charter, can we not just revise the charter with that, because the people of the town have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
They're bypassing us and just saying, so couldn't we have language that says, on that particular type of amendment, which our city attorney would be monitoring anyway, he would just bring it to our attention and we could just, the council could change it. Because it's not something we can do anything about, and it makes it less confusing for people. See what I'm saying?
That's a great idea.
You know, and,
They should even notify the city.
we could give this to our senator, our representative, and maybe even send it to, the AG. I mean, she's no friend, necessarily a friend of ours, but on the other hand, it's harmless. You know, it would be good for the whole state, really.
Actually,
Oh, you know, there must be a Michigan Municipal League, right?
Yes.
Okay, send it to them. Get them behind it as a lobbying, you know, as a lobbying group of the state. And, I think that's, really something that we should do. And we don't wanna do that, 10 times a year, maybe once a year when we have something that comes up like this, that we could, we don't wanna be pestering these people all the time. And then they just throw it away. But if it's just sort of an occasional thing, and that this is a major thing for us, and I think we could, I really think that would be a good thing for the council to do.
I think that's a great idea.
It saved a lot of,
A lot of
the whole election process and,
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, it would be, it's cost effective, it's nonpartisan, it's just government efficiency. It has all of those benefits, and I don't see the downside. Because you can't monkey around with it, it still would have to go through the state,
Mhm.
so.
They'll send it to the AG's office and say, yep,
Yeah,
it doesn't,
yeah. I mean, it just seems to me, no damage,
Mm-hmm.
pure plus thing to do. So,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
let's do
Does
that.
the state notify us when it changes a law that would substantively affect the charter?
not that I.
Yeah, because Tom Thompson seems to know these things.
Well, yes, but they don't necessarily notify.
He researches it.
He researches them.
Yeah. And I
We
think-
know that they changed, or they updated their own, and then we have to go through and we hear about bits and pieces. So then we have to go through and see how it affects
Does
us.
Tom have a list of the things that have been changed up till now? That would save us a lot of trouble. If he's been keeping a list of this stuff over the years.
It's fairly well documented in the editor's notes in the charter that things have been superseded. Some of those notes about something being superseded has itself been superseded. But,
Laws change all the time.
yeah,
But that would require legislative action to accomplish.
Yeah.
pretty cool.
It would affect everyone in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be good for everybody. And put that in my gubernatorial campaign.
You got it out soon, Jocelyn's already in.
That's right. Okay. So anyway, all right, now, so that being said, all that preliminary stuff being said, do we want to, do anything right tonight, or what do we want to do? What's the consensus here?
But yeah, we can talk through some things
Okay.
if we want.
Sure.
I've got all the substantive things that I thought need to be changed, in this packet here,
Okay.
or,
You have enough for
I
everybody?
think yes, I handed these out.
Oh, this already, I have this already.
I don't know, yeah, if we wanted to read through them, I didn't see anything in chapters 1 or 2. These were pretty, just sort of giving the city the power to be a city and to act. So the first thing I had was section 3.3 in the wards. And that just outlines the ward boundaries, so I got the registered voters for each of those wards. And then in section 3.4, we can see that we have to
Well, okay, but now, what we wanna do for this is just change the language to make it conform to the state law, right?
Right.
In other words, we wanna separate very carefully that from any, like, Councilman Bentley had an idea for changing the charter. Well, that wouldn't go in with this package. We wanna, that would be I think that would be a big mistake to link the two.
I think this would still be an amendment.
I'm not saying it's bad, I think it's, but it would be an amendment, you're right.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is the amendments, at this first step of it, should be amendments just to conform it to the state.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
I'm not sure if we're necessarily out of step with the state. I pulled the Supreme Court ruling from 2016. This is for congressional districts, a couple paragraphs down right here. And it says that our threshold, or the threshold for congressional districts should be a 10% difference. And then I have some other state, city charters here. Right, Cadillac says the population should be approximately equal. Jackson says as nearly an equal population as practicable. But then up, section 3.4 here, ours is that it can be up to a 50% difference. So this is one, I don't know, is that a violation of state law? I don't see any reason to believe that it is necessarily a violation, but it's certainly not in conformity with other charters.
Right, but that's not, it seems like a reasonable thing that you put before the voters at some point, right? But it wouldn't be the same as making this conform to the state statutes. I think the first cut at this should just be the housekeeping.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? I don't want people to think that we're trying to sort of sneak in other things than just that at the first cut.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking that that's not necessarily, that is, we should be doing that every 10 years. We haven't been.
Right, but that's a separate thing.
Okay.
And we would have to go, I think we'd have to go to the voters for that, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, so that's a different
Well, we
step.
have to go to voters for all of this? Or not
Maybe,
for
that's
these
what
ones?
we're trying to
Well,
find
we have
out.
to go to the voters for all of,
Yes.
for even the amendment.
I'm just saying that if we overload it and we mix in things that are good, but not conforming to, just simply conforming to state law, then people are gonna say, well, you guys are mixing in this and that, and,
They might say that you're doing a revision
right.
without going through the proper
But you said
process.
earlier, you just wanna add footnotes for clarity.
Yeah.
That's your housekeeping bit, right?
Well,
That's
that
it.
could be what we do. If we, in terms of just the state statute stuff, we could do it that way, and just, and we could do it unilaterally.
And that's the housekeeping. and
That's the
now we'll
housekeeping,
wind up.
but it would be better if we could amend the charter to do that, because then the charter would actually be accurate. You wouldn't have to go, jump from one thing to the other. when
Okay,
you're
well,
reading
this
the
is,
charter.
when I'm reading it, this is one of those things, right? When the population difference is 50%, which we have, this shall be done. So that seems to me a housekeeping. It's been triggered. We must re-abortion according to the federal census.
Right.
But we can sideline that for now. On the second page, this is definitely housekeeping. The election date, Okay, it's not the first Monday in April of 1958. So I said, strike the current language, a regular city primary election shall be held on the first Tuesday following the first Monday in August of each even-numbered year. A regular city election shall be held on the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November of each even-numbered year. That's what state law says. We could cut the language instead of all this first Tuesday following the first Monday, we could just say the regular election date in November, the regular election date in August. Either way.
I like it the way you got it here,
Okay.
because it's specific.
Very specific.
Yeah, I like
And then
that.
this attaches to our ordinances, which also need to be updated when we can get to that.
Okay, great.
The elected officers, all I'm doing here is getting rid of the 4 supervisors and the municipal judge. Because those were abolished in the 1963 Constitution.
Excellent.
Terms of office for elected officials, we are eliminating the supervisors again and the judge, and then changing it from 2 years to 4 years.
Which is correct.
Yep, and then specifying that these are biannual elections every 4 years rather than annual elections, as they have them. Okay. 3.9, special elections. This actually brings up the difficulty that I mentioned at council last week. So currently, we need to call the special city elections at least 30 days in advance of such election. That doesn't work with modern election law. The state law here below, 168.631, says 45 days before the date of the special election, but that still isn't enough time for the petition. So I'm not even sure if the state law right here is up to date with what the actual practice of the Secretary of State is. So I was thinking about 90 days is what we need. So this is sort of a question mark for me. What exactly should that be?
Yeah, because again, I agree with you. I think that's a good idea, but I want to really be disciplined about this and keep it to what the state law says.
Okay.
So if they say 45 days, well, that's it, but, you know.
Would 45 days be enough time to get a petition in? They're due about 5 weeks before the election.
Right.
No, more than that, because they were due in February for a May election. They're due almost 3 months early.
Well, they were due January 21st for the May election for the petitions.
So a special election needs to be called 4 or 5 months in advance. Maybe I have the wrong state law reference here, but that's what it linked to.
February, March, April.
Let's check into that.
It's at least 90 days because, so we can check into it because if they were due January 21st and then May 4th is the election, you have all of February, all of March, and all of April.
Yeah.
Plus the 2 weeks or a week or so, so you get over 90 days that actually, to meet their calendar.
All right,
So, and
let's clarify that one.
Okay. It's not less than 45 days, so I don't know if we can choose our own timeline, but the 45 days I don't think would work. Anyway, okay.
Well, not less. Oh, yeah, well, not less. So that would be okay. And the 90 days would be okay. It's just, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we could just say that in, we could just adopt their language though in our suggestion, which would be not less than 45 days and then make it 90.
Okay. We
Right?
could probably just ask Katie, what is the time frame that
Yeah.
you need by law?
Yeah, but I mean, we could, in other words, that would be disciplined again.
Okay.
Because, see what I'm
This
saying?
must have been, in the olden days, you could call an election pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
snap elections.
And then the last line of this is not for amendment, but just for our consideration. No more than 2 special city elections shall be held in any one fiscal year. So I just want to be sure that when we fill the mayor's seat, we are not legally allowed unless we find a difference to fill that seat for city council, unless we find that this has been overridden in some way. That's what I was trying to say. I didn't explain myself well at council, but if we call the election for mayor, we can't call a special election to fill council because it could trigger a primary, in which case we aren't allowed under the charter to call the general. So there is no way to get both elections, in my reading of it.
I think the timing is problematic.
If we go with November general election,
Yeah.
which opens that.
So right now, this might be more substantive, but our charter is written in such a way that if you accept the lawyer's interpretation of next regular state election, you necessarily must violate this provision. So we should try to find a way around that. Okay, notice of elections, this was just the state law reference. There is no 168.635A. And I forgot to write down which portion does. That's probably something I can just have Katie update. The primary elections, it says the first Wednesday in March. That's not what we do anymore. So I changed it to shall be held on the regular election date immediately preceding a regular city election. We could be more specific and say the regular August election date immediately preceding a regular November city election. But we don't hold them anymore in April or in March. And then I wasn't sure how to include if there's a special primary election. So I wrote, or the regular election date immediately preceding a special general election. This was a very confusing section to try to write. I wonder if there's an easier way to phrase that altogether. Okay, the nominations. I striking supervisors in both sections, and then it says that the petition shall be filed with the clerk at least 30 days and not more than 37 days prior to the holding for the date. That's no longer how Katie does it. You have until the date set by state law, and you can do it up to that date. So there isn't this time frame, so I just struck that. And then I was curious at the end, do we still have to publish in newspapers about the election date?
I believe so.
Okay, so we can leave that in there. Form of the ballots, struck the language about the supervisors again. Canvass of votes, I believe the election commission no longer convenes the Thursday after the election at 8 p.m. because of the new state laws. So we just need to get from Katie to Katie and say, when is the date now that you convene to canvass the election? And I also, the setting of the 8 p.m. hour, I think we should maybe just give them discretion to meet any time during that day that works for them.
I agree, but again, we have to keep it
Yes,
conform. If the state law says, gets that specific,
I think, oh, I forgot to include it. I think it's by a certain date now under the new law. So we can change it to that. Compensation, this whole section can be struck and we can just change it to shall be determined by the local officers compensation committee.
and is that in the state law?
That is the state law, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Pro Tem, yes. OMA accordance, I didn't know exactly how to phrase this on the back. We can keep it as written ballot as far as I understand under state law, but I wrote, but the clerk should print the name of the mayor and each councilman on his or her respective ballot. Maybe we could even include them in the minutes or something like that. Or we could just strike the written ballot thing altogether. There is no state requirement on that except for the OMA that it has to be published who we vote for, so that is up to our discretion. So that might not be included in this basket of things you have in mind, since we need to conform to OMA, but do we need to amend the charter to conform to OMA, or can we just continue the practice that we have where we vote and then Katie records it? City manager appointment, this was substantive, so we can pass over that. I just wanted to clarify that the duration of the appointment is 5 years period, and I wanted to change it to 4, but that would be substantive. Section 4.7, this was a bunch of different things, not in conformity with state law, but we don't have Board of Health, for example, anymore. A bunch of boards that we just don't exist anymore, that they Same with the mayor, obsolete provisions, titles, and committees that no longer exist or are in operation, but that we can pass over. This was also a clarifying thing. The police chief isn't an administrative officer, but that's not a state law thing. So earlier it says that the mayor shall appoint all administrative officers, including the city clerk, the treasurer, the police chief, but then in this section, it doesn't include the police chief as an administrative officer. Do you know if he is, Dave?
That is done, by the mayor with council approval, yeah.
Okay. Again, not a state law thing, but it could be consistency within the charter.
Yeah, I think it's in the charter, that's supposed to be a function of the mayor and council.
Okay. The other thing on here that wasn't clear, so the mayor shall appoint all administrative officers with the consent of the council, but in an earlier provision, it says that the council shall appoint the city manager. So it's not, it wasn't, do you know how it worked with you? Who appointed you, Scott Sessions?
I think it was done by the council as a whole,
Okay.
so, because Scott voted no. Yeah.
Okay, so it
Yeah,
definitely
so-
was.
Yeah, it was done as a council as a whole, on that, on my hiring.
Okay, the logic of the charter makes it sound like the mayor should make the appointment and the council should confirm, but then, again, not within what you wanna do. Recreation Commission and Municipal Hospital are both obsolete. Let's see. Section 5.1, I didn't know what this provision was meant to do. I'm gonna read that.
May be appointed, is that? An elected officers may be appointed?
It must be.
Oh, so that was the clause, that's the clause that if, the way that it's been interpreted to me is, so if you wanted to be the zoning administrator, after being on city council, or mayor, or not mayor, or city manager, or any position, you'd have to wait 2 years,
Right.
to be hired.
Then, so what is this fill a vacancy? So we serve our 2 terms, but then you may fill a vacancy. Is this intended to override the term limits in the case that there's a vacancy, no one runs for office or something?
I think, let's see. Now,
Yeah.
I'm just giving my speculation on this, because this is like when Bruce Sharp was, he had ran, and I think he was termed out, and he was out for a while, and then there was a vacancy, after a certain period of time, and he either ran, I believe he ran, for a partial term, and then he did his 2 terms again, so there had to be a gap between you could run again. That's,
You're only allowed to do 2 consecutive terms, but I was
and
wondering,
then you need a gap.
just by the logic of that provision, I assumed you needed to wait a full 2 years before you could run again for anything. But now it's seeming to say, if no one runs, you can fill the vacancy or something.
It says provided that, that's the funny language, that provided that after the expiration of this term, you may be appointed to fill a vacancy in the position of council. So it sounds to me as if, for example, at Ward 2, you don't, my ward, you don't necessarily get anybody to run. I fill a vacant position. I never ran against anybody because there was nobody running against me.
So let's say no one runs against in 26, can you then fill it?
Yeah, that's the question.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's what I was getting out of it.
That's what it sounds like,
So
right?
bizarrely worded.
Well, it's provided that, so it seems like, it should be except that after, it just as the.
Right,
law said.
right. because they're trying to exclude people.
Yeah.
So this was one that I wanted to rewrite,
But
just,
you would know that no one else ran until after the deadline passed.
Right.
Right.
For you to put your
Were
name.
you in that position by the mayor? How'd you get that position back?
what I was thinking is this was a
He
holdover.
may be appointed by whom?
But if you haven't been relieved of duty, you just continue on?
See, some.
Yes, according to the charter, I believe that if no one takes office after you, you're still a councilman.
Right, yeah, you're still not elected.
Yeah.
That was some of the discussion we had because of the delay for the canvassing, extra time for the canvassing.
Yes.
Because Bruce is,
Mhm.
Bruce was like, I'm done that first, that Monday after.
Right.
That election, but it was stretched out another
Right.
week.
Right.
And we needed to make sure we still had some of the old guys.
Yeah, that must be the reason why, what it was intended to accomplish. In other words, you don't, it's not desirable to have nobody at all representing a ward. I assume
Until a
that's-
new
I
person's
was that
on
reading.
it.
If it's a holdover from an earlier charter that allowed filling the vacancies by council
They did have that ability.
prior to 2005.
And it was changed.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not 100% certain, but I think Ted Jansen had something to do with pushing that, and it was adopted or changed at some
Well,
point.
anyway, it has nothing to do with the state
No,
statute.
it doesn't, but one of these things
It's
that's
definitely
very
something you should
confusing.
look at, that's for sure.
Okay, the one we just went through, filling vacancies in office, there is no such thing as a regular state election under the Michigan, election law. It doesn't exist. So I'm suggesting, if we accept the lawyer's interpretation, then this should say next regular election date. The difficulty here is, it's my belief that the purpose of this provision was to prevent these rolling special elections. So we sort of have to make an interpretation about what the original drafters of the charter meant in order to know how to amend this to conform with state law. If we accept my interpretation, it should say next even numbered year general election. If we accept Jack's interpretation, it should say the next regular election date. Again, unless anyone was able to, I don't think Jack was able to find anything that
Well-
said next regular state election. That doesn't exist.
I would say this, I'm going to side with the city attorney, Josh, on this, because the state would have elections every year. They just changed this 2 years ago to be even number years. So if the state originally had elections every year, then Tom's interpretation would be correct, because it would be every year you would have a state election. Yours was never, your every 2 year was never considered until they changed that law 2 years ago. So his was in place from the very beginning. It changed just two years ago or so, 3 years ago.
But when it changed, we no longer have a regular state election every year. So we're saying we're gonna use that interpretation even though there isn't a regular state election anymore.
Well, but the state still gives you an election dates for this year, because that's what that calendar is.
Right, election dates.
Yeah,
There is
that's-
no
that's
such thing
different.
as a regular state election. It doesn't exist under the law. Yeah.
Okay, so that would be something that we would need to conform to whatever the state says, right?
Depending on our interpretation of the
Well,
charter
wait,
is the problem.
here's the thing, it doesn't have to be our interpretation, we could contact the Attorney General's office and ask them.
We talked about that before we took the vote though, and you said they didn't want anything to do with it, right?
The election commission.
What is the purpose of the declaratory ruling then?
Well, the election commission, well, what about the Attorney General? I mean, right?
We can attempt to solicit,
Yeah.
an opinion, but, typically what they tell you is to seek your own legal counsel,
Well, okay, that's fine.
because no one wants to
But
put their
if
name
that's
on
what they
something.
do, that's what they do, but I think we should, at least ask them,
Yeah.
right?
Do-
Why not, they can't hurt.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
We just have to write it up, so it's
Yeah.
clear what our,
And
we're
refer
asking.
it to the Attorney General's office, this issue has come up in our in our city. We want to know if there is a state, a governing state statute that covers this issue. And if so, what is it? And if not, then, and if it is just up to the interpretation of the city attorney, then it's up to the city attorney. That's fine, you know, but that's the objective way of doing it, just find out what
Yeah.
they say.
What is a regular state election?
Well, and if there is none, then what do we do?
Yeah.
Do we have leeway, can we do what we wanna do, you know, that kind of thing.
The problem, I think the problem we're encountering is there's holdover language from when vacancies were filled by council, and there's
Yes.
holdover language from when elections were in March.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the, okay.
And so we're trying to make all that match.
But that's something that we can change, because, in conformity with whatever the state tells us the law is.
Yes. Yep.
That's all I'm saying,
Yep.
so that would be still relevant to what we're doing.
Yeah,
right
oh,
now.
definitely.
So that's good to, you know, that's good to look into, that's what I'm saying.
Oath of office, simple one. The section that they put is section 2 of Article 16, that's from the 1909 Constitution, I believe. So the 1963 Constitution has the oath in section 1 of Article 6 of the 1960. And I added the year, so that 50 years from now, when we have a new constitution, they'll know that's the wrong one. I did see that, so the other thing was, it said they must comply with the provisions of this section within 10 days originally. That is no longer compatible with state law because you can't be sworn in within 10 days anymore. It now takes 13 days did it take this year, I believe. It was 2 weeks following the election. I did have this question, does Hillsdale bonds in place? Turns out we do have the authority still to bond our treasurer and police chief if we want, so we can leave that language in. That's good old American founding stuff. If you want to be a treasurer, you're going to pay $10,000. The regular meeting, so this is what we ran into after the election. The regular meeting shall be held at 8 p.m. on the Monday next. That no longer complies with election law. We can't have votes certified. So I'm suggesting the second Monday after at our normal time at 7 o'clock. So that complies with the state election law, but it's also up to our discretion, so I don't know how you would judge that. We certainly can't do the Monday after 8 o'clock, no longer possible.
I would say that's fine.
Okay. 6.8, providing for public health and safety, we now have the county boards of health. That is a state statute that was passed, right? Cities no longer anywhere, I think, have city boards of health. So that would be a state one. This was an amendment also for us, the operating personnel for the BPU. It says that the city manager shall employ a superintendent of utilities, but you're employing yourself under this language. And also it should be updated for board, director of board of public utilities. All that language is off, they still use the language of public works. So that would probably fall outside of this category of what we're doing right now, but just for clarity. So it does say earlier in the charter that you can combine any administrative positions that you want, but once we combine them, we should make it clear that he is not employing himself, he's in a separate class. And then the rest were ordinance changes then to comply with what we're at. So the first one I had was that currently it says the city can support the Mitchell Public Library. So that was actually never updated in the ordinances. This is what I was talking about 2 years ago, right when I got on council, about how maybe they were improperly funding the Hillsdale Community Library because the council never actually changed what library they're supposed to fund. So we should update that for Hillsdale Community Library. That would just be a public hearing. Election of council members and mayor. This is back from when we had odd year elections. So I'm updating that to the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November 2026. Then we'll have the mayor and council elections. set of council members in November 2028. So we no longer have the odd year language in the ordinances, and that's another public hearing. So we could actually make a motion on these two to just go for it. And then the terms of office, 4 years dating from the Monday following the odd numbered year election at which they were elected. This is no longer possible under state law. So I said 4 years dating from the Tuesday following the even numbered year election. Oops, I missed a word. Should be second, oh, okay, no, this was a question I had, yes. Do we want terms to start on the election day or on the swearing in day, or as a lot of other cities do, a hard date? You begin on January 1st at 12:01 a.m. and you need to be sworn in by then. We have this weird provision now where it's sort of floating, right? You wait until you're sworn in. So we could say the second Monday following the election, because that's when we would have the first meeting for the new members. So we could do shall be 4 years dating from the second Monday following the even numbered year election at which they were elected. That would be in accordance with section 6.1 regular meetings. Or we could do a hard deadline. Or we could do the day of the election.
Well, but the day of the election, you wouldn't have the vote certified, so you have to wait till that certification is done.
It's a challenge between two of the accounts, all that stuff.
I wouldn't want that.
So it would need to be the
Either the other two would get better.
14th or the following.
We've been doing second Monday, or we've been doing the Monday following, now we can just do the second Monday. Okay. And then the other thing I was proposing, this would be totally new, there were questions about whether the old council members and mayors could preside at the meeting to swear in the new members. Some city charters have it spelled out very clear. Yes, you have the authority to make a quorum to swear in the new members. I was hearing from people, they're not allowed to be there. It's like, well, how do you get the next council?
Yeah, you have to have a quorum in which.
That's just logic.
It's logical. I don't know if we want a section to state it out explicitly, but that was an idea. Okay.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeoman's work.
Oh,
My
it's
pro tem.
great scholars work. It was a great time.
So anyway, so what I think we should do then, is to, bring this to, mention this in council,
Okay.
right? And,
So I'll condense this down into everything that I'm reasonably certain is in accordance with state law
Yeah.
one. I'll make a separate document for things that are, I think, necessary for consistency within the charter, how we actually do things, and then
Right.
separate them.
right, and, yeah, so that would be good.
Okay.
And then we can do this, letter, we can find out, first of all, if we have to have a whole list of this stuff for the, for a charter vote by the city residents. We have to have a separate thing so that the ballot gets to be this long, right? Which doesn't make any sense. And if that's, if we can't just limit it to that, 100-word thing, and then have it posted somewhere where people can read it, or put it online, or whatever we do.
Well, they would have to vote for each of these items specifically, because the way it reads is they could adopt one and not the other. And
Yeah,
so-
that's what I was
and-
thinking.
At 100 words.
So in other words, so we couldn't do it that way. You'd have to, we'd have to have a long ballot, and that doesn't make sense.
So they have to each be,
Yeah.
I mean, does it have to be 100 words, or every one of them gets their own 100 words?
That's another one.
I don't.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, even without that, even if we didn't have to do that,
Yeah, no,
it's too long.
You must be able to do a chapter at a time. There's no way you have to vote on each section, right?
Yeah, but we only have 1 or 2 elections a year, so, we'd be 10 years before we got it
If the
all
state
done.
constitution was around, then you.
This is why I think we should just do it, if that's the case, then we should just do it as, not as a part of the document, but as a supplement to, you know, as a, I don't know what word we could use, a memorandum or something like that. And then we could have all that and spell it
You
out.
can't be the only one with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's gotta be a straight line way to do it. If you do a revision though, it's just yes or no. So the revision is actually easier than the amendment.
The
But
revision
we can't
takes,
do it, it's
It
not a
takes
revision.
years.
It's
No,
not
I know, but I'm just saying,
so you have to, on the revision, you elect actually a slate of
yeah,
nine people, I think.
Well, revision is
And
that,
then it's 18, they anticipate it's 18 months after the election of that.
What about a brand new charter?
That's what that pretty much is.
Yeah.
They go through it page by page.
Yeah, no, that would not be good. We can't do a revision, it's not a revision, according to their definition. None of this
This
stuff,
is not.
this doesn't change the form of government, it's not a huge
no.
issue. So
But
it's-
there
it's-
are
it's
things
amendment.
that I'm proposing that would come close to that, I think, maybe, I don't know.
I got it, but it doesn't look like it to me, for the most part. At any rate, conforming to the state statutes does not,
So state
is
law
not,
charter.
is not a revision. And so that's an amendment. And so if it's an amendment, it sounds like it would be impractical to put it on the ballot, and therefore we can't do an amendment. We have to do some sort of supplementary document that explains to people that certain provisions are now obsolete according to. And we have to, the other thing when we explain this, the principle behind it is that ever since the Constitution, the 1789 Constitution, the states create legally, the municipalities are legally the creations of the states. People don't understand that.
Mhm.
You know, people think that somehow it's like the Articles of Confederation and because Detroit, right, historically, existed far before even the United States existed. It was a French city. But in legal terms, it's a creation of the state, and that's the whole idea of a charter. So we have to explain that to people, because a lot of people don't get that.
Yeah.
And, so that's why we must conform to these, otherwise we can just go our own way. You pass this nice statute, but we don't like it, so we're not gonna do it. And then we can't do it that way. And that's the basic principle behind it. It's a state's rights, it's a state power to constitute these cities legally. And so anyway, I think that's what we could do. If we can winnow this down to the things that are strictly conforming to the state statutes, and then ask the council to authorize us to put some sort of memorandum beneath the charter, and maybe a little message before the charter saying, you know, some of these things are no longer operative due to state statute. And that kind of thing. That would settle it as best we can. And then also write this letter to our representatives and anyone else who might possibly listen to us, to try to get this so that we can actually put them in, you know, just by council matters in terms of the conforming to statutes. Well, you know,
We
you
can
know what
ask.
they're gonna do.
We can ask,
And,
and they would
yeah,
take
the
legislative action.
Michigan Municipal League, you know, I mean, it just makes so much more sense to do it that way.
Because everybody, all cities are in the same boat.
There's no harm in it, it doesn't cost us anything to write a few letters.
Yeah, right.
Well, the whole state needs to probably amend their election
Yeah.
provision now
Yeah.
because of the election
Yeah,
laws.
exactly.
So
So why shouldn't that just be
cities.
something you enact as a city
Yeah.
council, rather than having to put it on a ballot to revise your charter?
Yeah, very good. Should we set a special hearing for these two, these three?
The last ones?
The library thing, if we think that's necessary to update the Hillsdale community. the election of council members and mayor to change it to even numbered years, and the terms of office from 2 years to 4 years.
And that would get, well, if we had a, now those would be, those would go to the voters, right?
That's just public hearing, those are just ordinances.
Oh, okay, oh, then, yeah, might as well.
So we have publication.
Yeah.
Public hearing.
Yeah,
and
sure. Yeah,
potential
makes sense.
adoption.
But you could, so when we have the packet for the next, I don't know, if it's the next council meeting, because it'd
We'd have to follow the publication.
Yeah.
That's their timeline, so it probably wouldn't be the next meeting, like,
what,
next Monday.
yeah, whatever.
It'd be sometime in February.
Correct procedure is.
Okay, you wanna send, 2-265, 12.3, and 12.4. I don't know, if Tom wants to use different language, that's fine, but accomplishing those goals.
Those are just ordinances, so we
Yeah.
prepare the ordinances. Publications. It would be probably the second meeting in February or the first meeting in March before we get done.
It's not exactly something that we have to do tomorrow.
If we do run into amendment issues, I do think it would be worth the time to do the wards, especially since we're at a 600 person difference now between wards 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And I think that's fairly routine for cities to redraw their ward lines.
I think you could do that by ordinance, right?
That was I would have thought ward lines would have been by ordinance, but it's saying they're in the charter. So, yeah, I think we have to amend it.
That would go to the voters.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And the amendment, I was looking at the word maps, it'd be pretty easy, just actually Ward 2, just cut it along Hillsdale and Carlton Street, sort of move it over, move Ward 1 down. For some reason, Ward 4 goes all the way up into this north side of St. Joe's and Bacon Street, just move it all the way down. I think we'd get pretty close to about 1,000 in each ward just by making them straighter.
Yeah. That'd be good. Okay, so we have ordinance, we have a charter amendment that would go to the voters, and we have this business of the other things that we wanna, we would use as an addendum of some sort, or a memorandum to clarify what we've got.
Yep.
And we have the letter to the municipal league and to our elected representatives.
Should we deputize someone on the letter? I'm happy to do it. Bring up a copy, bring it to the committee for your approval.
So, who's gonna do that?
I can do that.
Oh, you want to?
And then we should probably have a motion if Tom is gonna review those ordinances for a public hearing.
Okay. so
Okay, I
moved.
will, okay, so section 2-265, 12.3, and 12.4.
Slow down, slow down.
Oh, sorry.
Two what?
2-265,
Two, sorry, 2-265.
12-3, and 12-4. Have Tom review my proposed language and see if that conforms with state law and with our practices. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, so moved.
Okay.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Good. We accomplished something.
Very good.
Even Penny's smiling over there. Nodding her head sagely. Very good.
Oh, this is such a beast. I got my ordinance document too. That one was really unruly.
All right, any other business to come before the meeting? I hear none, if not, I'll entertain a movement to, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Or
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Good.